Welcome to Lead Today with me, Kalyna. Let's talk leadership. Hey, and welcome back, everyone. We're continuing along. It's interesting because this is a travel series that we're on at the moment. But there's just been so much going on in a personal sphere and with things on the horizon in terms of episodes that it's almost a little hard to focus on travel. It's interesting what becomes most important depending on just the current events of your life. You know, if you're in a season where you really want to travel, then these episodes can feel like the most important, compelling information I could possibly share. But depending on what season of life you're in, just you have different priorities. I was reminiscing about this with a friend the other day of, the problems we had when we were 16 versus 26, and it's how it changes throughout the decades. And isn't it the case that, well, things feel so dire or so significant at one point, and yet down the road, or just even a few days or weeks, the context can really shift your perspective. So if you're here and you're all about travel at the moment, I totally understand. I think I spent a good decade being all about travel, so my heart is with you. If you're here and have other things on your mind, maybe this will give you a different perspective or area of focus, a break from the other things that you have on your mind. But let's dive in, because actually the country of discussion today is Brazil. And man, do I have a lot to say about Brazil. I'm going to keep it to whatever time I can. But my heart, my soul, I felt just so embraced by Brazil's everything: culture, the people, the food, the dance, music, I suppose that's part of culture. Every element of Brazil spoke to my core, even the parts of Brazil that people speak about, potentially negatively, or they are concerned about things like, well, it's a developing country, which means, are their systems organized, and there's corruption in the government, and there's, it's dangerous. And aren't you worried about that? Aren't you worried about going to spend a good amount of time in Brazil and have those things be true? And I mean, I definitely didn't know what I was getting myself into leaving. I grew up in Canada, where very privileged, who was I to understand what it was like to live in a favela of Rio de Janeiro? Who was I to say? I had no idea what that could be like. And I still, have never lived in a favela. So even though I spent an extensive amount of time in Brazil over the course of a few years, I'm not pretending to be Brazilian, but certainly, I have to say, part of my heart will always be in Brazil. So why? What's the deal with Brazil? Why is it on my travel series list? Well, the way that I ended up in Brazil was sort of a funny thing, although the way I end up in most places is there's always a story to how I end up visiting a place, I suppose, and why it finds a place in my heart. Like Aruba, it was because my family vacationed there, and that was through a recommendation from a family friend. And then here we are, and I'm, spending time there, and it really became a sort of a second home in ways. You get really used to the place. And obviously Croatia, my family's Croatian, and so Croatia will be coming up in a few episodes, maybe the next episode. And of course, that's near and dear to my heart because of my family's history there and the lineage. Brazil is a funny story. So I went to a yoga retreat in Barbados. It was actually where it started was I went to a yoga retreat in Portugal, in the north of Portugal, near Porto. And so this family that ran the retreat in Portugal, lovely family, they have an interesting story of their own. But they were this retreat in Portugal in the mountains there was lovely. About a year later, I want to say, they were running a retreat in Barbados, and I thought, oh yeah, that'd be great. So I went to the retreat in Barbados, and Made a friend with the lovely English girl there who was also at the retreat. And, that was that. We went home, but we kept in touch. And she was planning a trip to Brazil with her friend. And I sort of invited myself along, quite frankly. I said, hey, would you mind if I came with you? And she said, no, yeah, come along. And so the three of us I started in São Paulo, and I met up with them in Rio. So I spent a few days with a family friend, stunning home, and just Sao Paulo's very, metropolitan and huge. If you have to take a bus anywhere, good luck to you. It's like hours of commute. Some people commute hours on the bus a day, like 2 hours one way, 2 hours another day. It's like really, really metropolitan, quite developed in the city center. It's really the commercial center, if not Rio. Those two kind of duke it out, although Sao Paulo's huge, commercially speaking. So, the real hub of commercial activity. And it was nice to spend a few days there with some family friends. You really got a local experience, go to the mall, go to a garden shop, go for dinner. So just really some local spots. And man, again, the food. Okay, what do you have to get? You have to get, if you drink alcohol, you have to get cachaça, and you can get it in a caipirinha, which is their sort of signature drink, the whole country. It's, caipirinha, caipirosca, and caipirosca is made with vodka. Usually caipirinha is made with cachaça, and just two different kinds of alcohol. And cachaça is so interesting. I got this bottle when I was in Salvador, but anyway, let's stay on track. So get a caipirinha or a caipirosca. You can do the regular one, which is with lime. You can do different ones with, strawberries or pineapple, and kind of go get some fruit in there, which is so nice. And it's a beautiful party drink, cocktail, if you will. But that's just the scratching the surface of Brazilian cuisine. There is so much to be said for, if you've ever heard of like Texas to Brazil or Fogo de Chão, like in the US, they have these big places, and it's a churrascaria. And so they're really big on meat in Brazil, probably one of the biggest beef producing countries in the world, if not the biggest. I mean, I know Argentina's on that. Argentina has a lot of beef production as well. So meat, barbecue, huge thing in Brazil. But the difference, I think, is it's not like American barbecue where you've got like a bunch of sauce on it. Like we're not dealing with barbecue sauce. We're talking like pure meat on a fire. And that's where the churrascaria, like if you go to one of these restaurants, they are like turning meat and have meat on a fire, on like a charcoal or fire grill. And so you're just getting a real authentic gaucho experience. So yeah, if you like barbecue, it's your spot. You'll have farofa e vinaigrette on the side, which is like little flakes of tapioca. No, cassava. Well, cassava becomes a little like a powder, and then vinaigrette is just like vinegar and onions, tomatoes, like a little sort of, it's kind of like chimichurri, but just more fresh. Like it's fresh vegetables and not as many herbs, and it's just like a stunning addition. Very Brazilian. And that's the beginning. Then you've got like crepioca, which is or tapioca, where they'll make it sort of like crepes, but they can do it either with this tapioca on its own, and it's sort of like a crepe but made with tapioca instead of the flour French kind of thing, like a batter. This is more just like tapioca. You heat it up, and then you can add, again, savory or sweet filling similar to a crepe. Oh, the food. Just the food. So what's interesting, if you go to the north, if you go, northern Brazil has a very African influence, especially near Salvador, where it was the port of the slave trade. And so there's some beautiful influences of African culture, because, well, it was traditionally served in Africa, and then they moved there. So you've got something like moqueca de camarão, feijoada, which moqueca de camarão is like it's a stew. It'll usually have, camarão is shrimp. So you have shrimp, but also maybe fish, kind of like a coconut milk. Not really a curry, but it's kind of like that, coconut milk, tomato, onion, coriander sort of deal. So, and it's very, I would say yeah, it's very baiano. Like it's very, that's a state where Salvador is in. It's very like a northeastern, is that moqueca de camarão or vatapá also, which is like a thick stew, and you've got shrimp in there too, but that one's like peanuts and coconut milk, and it's very thick and just and then you'll see if you're, I know we're kind of jumping from São Paulo to the Northeast, but man, is it just, the Northeast is so laden with this beautiful culture of Africa that just like has also become its own sort of thing locally. So you've got acarajé, another good one from Salvador area, Bahia. And it's made with black peas. But it sort of looks like a ball. It's kind of like arancini in Italian, but it's made with peas and not rice and meat. Is that like it's just peas, and they would deep fry it, and some onions. And then you got all the different pastéis, so pastel de nata, like you've got cheese, ground beef, chicken. They really love guava, so guava jam you could do. They usually call it Romeo and Juliet, where they'll put guava jam and cheese, which is delicious. And so you've got these really lots of nice pastries. So many. And then, okay, one other one is bolinhos de bacalhau, which is like cod balls. Not the balls of cod, but like fried. So you boil a fish and then you fry it, and you put some, you could put it with like a main dish with rice or something, but it's sort of just a handheld snack. So you just take the fish and that's actually from Portugal. So that's something that came more from the Portuguese side, less of the African roots than some of the other ones. Pão de queijo. So this is a Brazilian. It's actually from Minas Gerais. That is like the quintessential. You could go to Costco and find pão de queijo in the grocery store. It's just again a cheese bread. It is delicious. It's with cassava flour. So again, a lot of the cooking is with cassava flours. Cassava flour, which is from cassava root. This one is originating from the African tradition, and oh man, it's just delicious. You can have it on its own. You can have it with cheese. They serve it at breakfast. You can have it as a snack, as an appetizer. It's just delicious. And on the barbecue front, you've got picanha. So it's the rump cap of beef, and it's this triangular kind of piece of meat. And man, is that also good. And it's just, if you haven't been to a churrascaria, oh, you gotta go. It's just like, and picanha is the Brazilian, I guess, one of the best cuts that they're known for. So lots of food. Ooh, desserts. Brigadeiro is like a chocolate truffle. That's another good, delicious one. You got all kinds of stuff to eat. And I really resonated with the eating culture there, because not only am I just listing you off like amazing foods that are making me very hungry and wanting to go to a Brazilian restaurant, but food is really a part of their culture. And I know that's the case around the world, right? We connect around food. That's not a solely Brazilian thing, but some cultures just do it more, they just go above and beyond more than others, like Indian culture, for example, food, you just got these family style, there's just food everywhere and aunties are trying to feed you. Brazilians are like that. Brazilians are like family style, grill up a bunch of meat, show up on a Saturday for some grilling and just hang out, and it's such a social occasion steeped in family. Like there's this really, it's so beautiful to see Brazilian families and how tight knit they are. And it's so stunning because there is a lot of strife and difficulty, poverty, challenge. I went to a dance class in Salvador and met a lovely guy there who said, okay, my cousin was there too. Yeah, that was another twist. That was the second time I went to Brazil though. So we're jumping timelines, but and went to this family's home for lunch because, hey, you're from Canada, okay, come for lunch. And these people lived in like, I mean, it wasn't a favela, but certainly they lived in like quasi favela neighborhood. I mean, it was a rough neighborhood, certainly no dishwasher, washing machine, like very basic living, and the love in this home, the love of, his younger brother making me a chocolate cake, and the welcoming and them putting out all the stops to put a traditional dish on the table was something that could bring me to tears remembering it, how loved I felt by near perfect strangers. Was astounding because it wasn't about means. And I almost think that, you go back to when I came back to Canada, it was such a culture shock and a true, I felt heartbroken to leave and come back to a place where our doors aren't as open as the culture of Brazil. They're just so open-hearted and so loving, and it almost feels like, to the degree that they're open-hearted and loving, is for the reason why there's such an extreme other side of violence, crime, and the challenges that the country faces. It's what I've noticed over the years is sort of like the countries with the most love and openness, and they seem to struggle with an extreme on the other end of the spectrum, versus countries where maybe they've tampered down the openness dimension, and then they've also tampered down the crime. So it's kind of like, if you're getting a safe, developed country, yeah, it's great that you don't have to walk around thinking you might get robbed. But on the other hand, they just miss something of a soul, something of, well, a near perfect stranger inviting you in for lunch and just pulling out all the stops and making you feel so loved. Live music anywhere. People will just, man, the dance, the music, so I was doing forró, which is a certain type of dance, mainly in the northeast of Brazil again. Really, really fun partner dancing. I also tried samba and samba de gafieira. Samba is like an individual person's dance, but you can do it in groups. Also very African tradition. Very interesting roots, very fat. It can be very fast and challenging. Samba de gafieira just means with partner. And that's also a beautiful dance. But my heart really fell in love with forró and the different moves and turns and things. And the music is such a jovial, happy music. So, okay, well, let's go back a little. So I'm in São Paulo and I have this time with a family friend, and they're so generous and kind, and also exemplified exactly what I said in my last story. Just so kind, friendly, loving, open. And then we went to Rio de Janeiro. Again, so much love, but Rio has this beautiful juxtaposition of city and nature that just overwhelms your senses. Like, you've got mountains, the ocean, and then this town. Almost like favelas are just stacked up these hills, and buildings are sort of in between, like a jungle. Like, you just feel like you're this city around a jungle. And I love that they just intentionally or not done such a absolutely magnificent. Never have I seen something replicated so perfectly the way that Rio has just captured beach, mountains, city, nature, and the growth of humanity in these buildings and cities, these metropolitan centers. It is out of this world. Rio is definitely just a spot that has to be on your list if you like architecture, if you like nature, if you like great food, beach. It's just got something for everyone. I can't emphasize enough how cool Rio is, and that's why it draws in tons of people. I was fortunate enough to again, not on this first trip, but my second trip, actually attend some of the games at the Rio Olympics. So that was a huge experience and so fun. So that was the spot. Another one is Florianopolis in Santa Catarina. That is in the south. And another fascinating, you've got way more European influence. It gets a bit colder there than it would. Surf culture, safer, said to be safer. But a beautiful, beautiful area. And Florianopolis just has another spot that kind of sticks out with a place in my heart that is great if you want to. Well, if you're going to head down to Argentina while you're there, which, as you definitely should, go to Buenos Aires, and you could even go to Montevideo in Uruguay, which is a boat ride away. So I would go down to Argentina if you're gonna make the trek. You need to do the whole. Oh man, maybe I should do an episode on Argentina. Although I spent way more time in Brazil, so I might not be able to do it justice. One fun thing I did was I was at Foz do Iguaçu, which is a waterfall, very famous waterfall there, and I went skydiving from the Brazilian side over Paraguay and then Argentinian side and landed, and it was just like this beautiful scene of the falls and these three countries where the landscapes are similar. It's not like you really know, okay, here's the border of this, that. But to just be falling from 10,000 feet and to see such a beautiful waterfall, that was a really big adrenaline rush and wonderful experience, to say the least. So that's a good time. If you're looking to do skydiving, you might want to do it there. I had a great experience. So that's one thing. What else? So we're in Rio. Rio's great. Carnival in Brazil, also maybe not on this trip, but Carnival in Brazil, absolutely. Yeah, sort of a wow kind of experience, unlike any other. So you can go in Rio or Salvador. Salvador is, I mean, anyone from either city would say theirs is better. Rio's a bit more performance, like stage. You kind of watch these floats and you go and you watch as a spectator, whereas Salvador, it prides itself on being more interactive. So you've got millions of people in the streets following behind these big trucks that are playing music. The performers are on top of these huge trucks, and you're like walking down the streets with the trucks and following behind the different bands. You can be in a band and get a shirt, and then you kind of follow along. It can be with a particular artist, or you can, of course, go wherever you want. So that's kind of the difference between the two there, the big difference. But in Rio, you've got parties in the streets and groups of people that get together, and both are fascinating. But I think the costumes are, well, they're good if you're in one of those camps too in Salvador, but the costumes in Rio are a bit more extravagant. Again, if you're like watching the actual parade floats go by, it's a bit more like that, like a parade. Whereas in Salvador, it's more like music based, and you definitely, people have costumes and things, but it's like very driven on music and being there and experiencing the music and walking behind, and you're very much so a part of the parade, if you will. They also have, of course, like camarote, which is like on the side. And so it's like a VIP, like you would be more of a spectator there. So some people like to be more of a spectator, but I think the joy of Carnival is definitely being in the street and just enjoying the music and being a part of the experience. And tons of street food. Brilliant time. Of course, disclaimer, like street safety, be careful. My cousin and I did get robbed, unfortunately, on our way to Carnival in Salvador one day, but that was the only incident I had in, I've spent probably in total a year, on my multiple trips to Brazil. So yeah, I think if you have to have your head on, you have to pay attention, but in terms of danger, that was the only experience. And we were unharmed physically, I mean, emotionally, it was really tough to experience, but nothing. Thankfully, I'm still here, and so there certainly can be worse situations. But something to just think about, right? Be mindful. Don't walk down empty streets. Don't walk down streets alone, even if you think like you're just going to catch a cab or something. Just don't do it. Don't walk on an empty street past sunset. Don't walk, even if it's on a main street. Just don't walk alone past sunset, and don't walk alone, depending on where you're going and what you're doing. So that's. And I get it, right? Some people would say, well, but so that makes it hard to raise a family. And sure, granted, yes, there are considerations there that if you're living in North America, you might not be considering as much. It certainly changed me. I'm definitely more careful at night overall. Like I definitely just am more careful than I was pre going to Brazil. And I have a bit of that radar that I didn't necessarily have before. So that's definitely the case. But would I trade all of the love and all of the amazing food, dance, and experiences? Not a chance. Not a chance. Brazil, I could cry thinking about just the immense amounts of people that I met that extended their hearts to me, that were kind, that were friendly. Stayed in a bunch of hostels and just met all kinds of brilliant individuals, Brazilians and travelers. And so a hostel experience there was just wonderful because you had people that were, everyone was just so friendly. Come with us here. We're going here next. Do you want to travel with us? Like traveling in Brazil alone, I can't remember a moment when I felt alone. I have to say, like, there's just always, you walk out. I mean, I'm sure there were moments, but like that time in my life was absolutely, I wouldn't characterize it as feeling alone. There have been seasons of my life where I felt very alone, very isolated. This was not one of them. This was a time of like almost not never being alone and almost wanting or craving that. So, man, if you want connection, Brazil is just a spot, I think. Of course, it depends on what kind of trip you plan and how you go about it. But for me, I was feeling super connected with wonderful friendships across the board, the whole country. Okay. So we've talked a little bit about São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, Rio. Actually, in my book, so in Memorable, so here's another just like amazing connection. I met this guy at Carnival. No, not at Carnival, just a night out. But there are these little stands where they make caipirinha, the drink I told you about. And so I met him at one of these stands and we just started talking, and he does designs and he does beautiful drawings. And so, here fast forward a couple years and I needed illustrations for my book for Memorable. And I reached out to him. I said, you know what? Like, I'm not going to hire some random graphics person. You're great. Why, his work's fantastic. Why you want to do it? And he said, yes. So actually, his name is Ricardo. His images, his drawings are in my book. And that was just such a happenstance, random chance encounter with the person. And it just turned out to be such a beautiful friendship and so fruitful, and collaborating with him was wonderful. Now the downsides. Okay, so in Brazil, sure, the bus might not be on time. Sometimes it doesn't come at all, or it's very delayed. Flights are generally on time. I found the flights were pretty prompt when I was flying around the country, but public transit, you can have your delays. The rules can be fuzzy. People kind of do what they're going to do. That being said, what I admire about it is the entrepreneurial nature of the general public. Like, you have tons of people just selling things in the streets, vendors that sell things on the beach, that just food stands, lots of restaurants of just little small family restaurants. I think, of course, you have that in the US and beyond, right? Like the whole world has small restaurants. But I'm talking about like the micro entrepreneur. I'm talking about like how many people I saw just kind of with a stand selling ice cream, selling this, selling that. People would just go out and try to make a living, and that that entrepreneurial spirit, really, you do see it throughout the country. So I think as a nation, from kind of small family business to larger, there's this big emphasis on just doing your own thing and in taking matters into your own hands. And there's something about that I do like, for better, for worse. It's not, I mean, sure, there's bureaucracy, but it's not as mired in bureaucracy as some other places. And even when it is, they're just less. I mean, again, I guess it depends who you talk to, but I'm just talking about day-to-day public. Day-to-day public is focused on making things right for their family, mostly very religious nation, que Deus abençoe, like when I would leave the house, or anything, like they would say, may God bless you on your way, like there's a real religious kind of, even in the language, graças a Deus, like thanks to God, is like a common expression. It's not like something just saved for church. There are a lot of expressions in the Brazilian culture that are rooted in religion, and you see that in the way that the emphasis on family is there and the way that they speak in their language. Another interesting thing is that families are very fluid. So I think while there is a religious emphasis, there's so much love for, and there are a lot of families that are blended families, and there's just a more open, and somehow mature approach to that. Like I would meet people where, for better or for worse. It depends on depends on your philosophy in life. But I mean, if you have a kid with someone and then you don't stay for whatever reason, I find a lot in North America, it kind of creates huge tensions. There's a lot of sibling rivalry or these issues of like step parents. It's a big, big kind of problem that even I've personally faced. And it's a challenge to integrate two families or new families, or like it just brings up different issues that a family of a mother, father, and kid doesn't bring up. So that was interesting there, seeing a lot of families with step parents, step parents on both sides, co-parenting, kids from different places and just different parents, and people really embracing and being quite mature and open about it. I mean, again, this is a generalization. I'm sure there are issues and things, but just as a culture, I felt this sense of openness to focusing on family first, focusing on being loving, being mature in the face of familial differences, really welcoming in very adult relationships between, let's say, if parents are co-parenting, or like just doing a generally better job than what I had seen historically in my landscape growing up, where divorce meant, they hated each other and there were a lot of there are lawyers involved, and then you have like, they have to talk to each other through mediated means, and it's just like it would be a lot more removed. I found that there it was like there was more dialogue, there's more friendliness, there was a bit more amicable. It was more amicable when these sorts of changes would happen within a family or blended families. There was just this more loving approach to it that I really appreciated. All right. So if you're not already convinced to pack your bags, although I don't think it's my job to convince anyone of anything, but let's keep moving up the coast. So there's São Paulo, there's Rio de Janeiro, there's Florianopolis. Then you can move up and you've got, well, northeast at the top, as we talked about, Salvador. You've got Sobral and Jericoacoara and Ceará, which, okay, so Ceará is the state. I spent a good amount of time in that state. And Jericoacoara is just the kind of beach where dreams are made. There are no streetlights. Everybody from the town, it's a tiny little town, and not everybody, but many people watch the sunset on these particular set of dunes every night, and there's something so magical about everybody kind of coming out and watching, although that happens in Rio too, where people will watch along the beach. But man, it's outside of Fortaleza. That's the state of Ceará. Sobral was where one of the most loving people I have ever met is from. So I spent some good time there. When my cousin came with me the second time she's a teacher, and she came and taught English at a school. She taught in Sobral, and the city outside of Fortaleza. So she got some experience doing that, and we lived there for a little while. But then Jericoacoara is a coastal town that you can drive through to from Sobral. And I got to tell you, I mean, Fortaleza is known for being a bit dangerous. It's a bigger city on the coast. But Jericoacoara is just this dream. Like, you don't even have to wear shoes. You have beautiful little boutiques and shops, restaurants, and everything. The streets are sand, so no cars, no paved streets. Everything is like sand buggies, those dune buggies, like four-wheelers. And that is a unique, lots of honeymooners there. I feel like it's a unique honeymoon spot, but just stunning at night. Like, you absolutely see the stars. You can walk through the streets with flip-flops. You're definitely on vacation, and you're on beach time if you are in Jeri or Jericoacoara. So a beautiful beach visit if you're up there. You've got Lençóis, which is further west. There are these dunes. It's a national park. Lençóis Maranhenses, which is west of Jericoacoara. So if you're up there, it's like absolutely white sand and these huge sand dunes, and they're just marvelous right on the ocean there. So that's a stunning spot. If we go, and that's like the north, like the top of Brazil. If we go a little bit, and I haven't mentioned Belém or São Luís, those are two other bigger cities that are kind of on that northern coast. I didn't spend a ton of time there, but they do exist. Okay, let's see. So we go further east. We go east along the northern coast and we get to Natal. And Natal is a fun spot. You can go, they have there's an island. Oh, what's the name? What's the name? Oh no. There's an island off of Natal that people go vacation on that's really nice. Praia de Pipa. You've got some beaches. Like you could just drive down the coast and in theory be totally fine. I didn't spend a ton of time in Natal. I am gonna go. Where is I? So the first time I went scuba diving, which was fun because, well, no idea what I was doing. Oh yeah, okay. So I was in Porto de Galinhas, and that is a small little beach town with lots of kind of tourists going there. It's south of Recife, so it's another city. Recife's got a great dance scene. It's still very northeastern in culture. I went to an amazing Festa Junina, which is like it's a June festival. The roots are grounded in the harvesting, like the harvest season, the agricultural season. It's like a thanks for the season type of thing. And so Festa Junina though has lots of forró. Where did I go? Where was it? There was a small town. Was it outside of Recife or was it outside of Salvador? It's a good question. It's been a while. Oh, Maceió. Okay, sorry. I'm looking at a map trying to. There's just so many. This is another thing. Brazil is huge. Okay, you're never gonna. I spent a ton of time. I think I went to a lot of places, but man, there's still so many places I did not get to. I mean, I did the big cities and things, but whew, Brazil is a trip of a lifetime. You could just explore and drive the whole country and never be done. Really, it's just town upon lots of agricultural land. It's just huge. It's huge. It's like the U.S. Like it's just keeps going and going. So, no story about Brazil would be complete if I didn't mention the Amazon and the Pantanal. So, many people go and know Brazil for, of course, the Amazon rainforest, which was amazing. We went and scaled up a tree like 60 meters and we're in these hammocks, and it was just wonderful. I ate an ant that tasted like lemons. It was just, there was a guide that literally would walk through with a machete and cut us a path because there was no, it wasn't like a trail, it was just forest. And yeah, he would, so we were walking and then there was, oh, so we had Brazil nuts, which was fascinating to be able to find those nuts and just eat them. The family that we stayed with had this it almost looked like a forest in and of itself, which was their garden. And so they mixed different plants together, um, which was said to not attract animals to eat it because the scents were mixed with different plants. So that was interesting. Instead of, most of the time here we'll plant a row of potatoes or tomatoes or carrots or whatever. It's all in rows and organized. There, they sort of do more forest-like or natural planting where different plants are together and in different spaces. So that's interesting. But the Pantanal was this magical gem that I didn't or hadn't ever heard of. And the Pantanal is south of the Amazon, the most biodiverse place because you have every different environment. You have arid kind of desert, you have little ponds and things. You also have the rainforest right there. So this is fantastic. It's sort of kind of where the Amazon rainforest ends. But because it ends and then there's this sort of arid mix and forest, and it's very, very biodiverse. So lots of fascinating animals. There are tours there. It's almost like if you think of a safari or something, you could just go and see the most fantastic array of birds, wildlife of all kinds, alligators. It's just, and huge spiders. Wow. Yeah, big spiders. So if you're into wildlife, that is your spot. It's very cool in that way. And sort of hadn't really thought or heard of that. I knew of the rainforest, but again, hadn't heard of that piece. So definitely check out the Pantanal if you are into nature and wildlife in particular. So, oh, I could probably go on for days and days, but if you love cultured that is based on food, love, authenticity, this open-hearted, like your heart on your sleeve kind of people, Brazil is for you. I could speak for days about this place. So, and if you're going to do a tour, Sao Paulo, Rio, Florianopolis, down in the south in Santa Catarina, up Recife, Natal, you got Porto de Galinhas, which is like a nice beachy town, but there are lots. Oh, Morro de São Paulo. That's another island that I went to um, off of Salvador. So definitely check out Salvador for their food, culture, African culture. There's in the main square, you've got capoeira, which is interesting, um, which is sort of like a Brazilian dance martial art, which is so fascinating when you think about. I think in a society, we really need total tangential thought, but I was reading The Body Keeps the Score, and he talks about as a treatment for trauma, having these embodied methods for movement and breathing, and how the vagus nerve is connected from body to mind, not mind to body. So it's body to mind. And these practices of similar to Qigong or other martial arts, jujitsu, capoeira is dance and movement. And so first of all, they revere the ancestors very much through the practice of capoeira, which is fascinating in and of itself, to have a reverence for the elderly and a love for the elderly, which you see in Brazil because there's so much multi-generational living going on as well, which is beautiful to see, parents living with grandparents and children, and the whole ecosystem is there, which is so, so nice. And I think we've gone away from that in many ways in North America as well, which is having your family nearby, and pros and cons. But anyway, so the practice of capoeira, it's this dance martial arts type of beautiful practice that they do there, as well as, of course, there's Brazilian jiu-jitsu. That's huge. So if you're into any of those activities, it's also great. I almost didn't tell you. So in Rio, I did also Asa Delta. What is it, like paragliding? Parasailing? No. I think it's paragliding. You essentially run off. This guy's like, yeah, it's fine. We drive up this hill, we get out, and there's this huge kind of, what would you call it? It's not a parachute. It's like a hanger, like a wing hanger thing. And you go and you like run full speed ahead, holding on to this thing. He's like, yeah, just run until you can't run anymore. And so I ran off this cliff, and you run holding, of course, with a guide, an instructor, because so you run off at full speed off of this mountain, and then you're holding on, and then when you can't feel the floor anymore, you're flying. And so that was a stunning activity. Oh, so glad I remembered to say that before I closed off. Such a beautiful activity in Rio, because again, you have mountains and you see the favelas all the way up the hills, and the beach, and of course the ocean. And so you're flying down amongst nature and city, and wow, what an experience. So, man, we've covered a lot. Go to Brazil, eat some pão de queijo and churrasco. Go get a bit of picanha and maybe some tapioca, and drink a caipirinha on the beach. Have a brilliant time in the sun. Dance your night away anywhere, pretty much, with live music and eating out in the streets and people just milling around. Um, Definitely go to some samba, maybe catch a capoeira class, and hopefully learn some Brazilian Portuguese, because it's probably one of the most beautiful languages in my estimation that I've ever learned, had the privilege of learning and interacting with. So a huge thank you to all of my Brazilians. Tenho tanta saudade de vocês, seu país, e espero que a gente se venha logo, que preciso voltar. Brasil tem meu coração, viu? All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time as we head to Canada or Croatia. We'll see where we go next. Take care until then. Thanks so much for taking the time to listen to this episode today. It really helps the show when you like, review, subscribe, or donate to support the effort to continue producing amazing episodes just like this one. I look forward to seeing you again in another episode very soon, and take good care until then.